Good evening. Welcome to Planning Applications Committee. Apologies for absence.
Councillor David Dean. Thank you.
Declarations of pecuniary interest. Nothing to say. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree? Correct record, please. Thank you. Just for everybody's information, the way we operate is we introduce an item with an officer's report, and then we move across to objectors having a chance to speak, get 3 minutes. And when the objectors have spoken, the agent, if present, will also speak. Sometimes we have councillors from that particular ward who also wish to speak, so they get an opportunity then too. There will be a response back from the officer if necessary, and then we move to members of the planning committee, and after that there is no opportunity for the public to speak again. We will first ask for comments about the report, and then questions, and then finally with comments, and then we will make a decision on each application tonight. We have a relatively small agenda tonight. We are going to stay in the agenda order. Yeah.
Please note that this meeting is being sound recorded for subsequent broadcast on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Therefore, if you are participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded and to the use of those sound recordings for broadcasting. If you have any queries regarding this, please speak to me after the meeting. Please also note that we do sometimes have members of the public exercising their legal right to record both the vision and sound of the meeting. This is entirely independent of the Council, and the Council has no control over the use of this recorded material. If you have any questions, please speak to the people. Can't see any of them. Oh, sorry, Sarah's here now, but please speak to the people who are making the recordings.
So we're opening with agenda item 5, which is 36 Aston Road.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this application was deferred at the October Planning Committee meeting. The reason for deferral was a number of members raised a concern with the conflict of this proposal with potential legal advice that was received by the Council back in 2006. You will note within the report itself, officers have tracked down the legal advice, and we have added a section under 7.2 explaining the findings behind that legal advice. And so with that, having looked at that, officers still recommend that the application be granted. Just talking you, refresher, really through the application itself. This existing mid-terrace dwelling on Aston Road in Rains Park. Proposal is to extend and convert the dwelling into 2 flats. So the proposed extension works is for rear dormer window and single-storey rear extension. Proposal would result in a 1-bed ground floor flat and a 1-bed split-level flat covering first and second floors. So, Chair, really I'll direct members to the relevant additional section within the report, which is on that legal advice and the reasons for deferral previously in October. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I've been asked by the Apostles Residents Association to speak on this proposal. Their concern in broad terms, committee members, is the incremental undermining of the character of the Apostles area. If applications like this are passed. So I hope tonight the committee will look very closely at this application on grounds of the standard of accommodation. This site doesn't provide any additional housing. It simply converts one small 2-bedroomed house into 2 tiny flats. Now, the officer's report touches on elements of the National Planning Policy Framework and the core strategy that are about increasing access to a mixture of dwelling types and higher densities. But this development, as I say, doesn't really do either. It simply swaps one 2-bedroomed house for 2 single resident flats. If you look at the core strategy, para 18.1, which is core strategy 8, it notes that actually most of the mix of housing across the borough. In fact, 84% 2004 to 2009 was 1 to 2 bed flats. So I do wonder if there is a need for yet more 1 bedroom flats for single people. That's the only way that this actually meets the space requirements as well. There's a rather confusing paragraph at 7.31 of the officer's report that suggests that this is in character with the Belvedere sub-area. I assume it's a cut and paste error because that talks about houses being set in large plots, largely detached. Now, that's not an Apostles I know, and also the Belvedere estate is up in the village in Hillside. This is compliant with internal space, but only just. External space, amenity space, the second flat, the upstairs flat, doesn't have any at all, and that is in direct contravention of policy DMD2 and the relevant bit of the London supplementary planning guidance. We know from Merton's planning department that some inspectors have in fact supported the council in the past where a flat has had no direct garden access. So I hope you might take that into consideration. Touching briefly on the refuse, it's interesting that the planning report suggests that both flats will just share 1 bin in flat 1's outside space. I mean, that's fine, providing the 2 separate resident units can get on and agree that. There isn't no bin storage space for the upstairs flat. So as I say, I've been asked to speak that by the Apostles Residents Association. Their ultimate concern is actually the incremental effect, the long-term effect on the area, and I hope you will consider some of those matters very carefully in your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just remind members that we had a very full discussion on this item before, and the reason it was referred back was because we felt there was some legal advice that might exempt it. In fact, the officer's report is saying that isn't the case. I would love very much for conversions of small family dwellings to not happen, because if you visit Graveney Ward, we are smothered with them, and unfortunately haven't been able to stop any because of planning guidance. So I just think, unless anyone's got anything to add to our previous discussion, I think, and could you show now? Yes, okay, well, we'll take those comments then, and then I think I would like us to move to the vote on this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I remember when this particular guidance came in on the need to re-provide 3 bedrooms when conversions took place. And in essence, what we're told here is that this particular property is too subscale for that to apply. And we're proposing here to countenance the sort of micro division of an already tiny house to make 2 1-bed flats. So I just don't know whether where this process of slicing and slicing is going to end. So I'm getting a clear steer that you don't think we can turn it down, but I think it's actually really too small. The details are there about the lack of amenity space and so on, and the bin storage. I mean, this is going to be swamped if with wheelie bins out front, isn't it? It's it's just inappropriate. My recommendation to refuse is on the grounds that the property is, as presently constituted, sort of inappropriate for conversion into 2 small flats as proposed.
To speak.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Southgate has said excellently all the things I was going to say. And in addition, to take up the point that Councillor Fairclough made, I mean, it doesn't meet the requirements of policy DMD2. It says, which says there should be a certain amount of amenity space, and there isn't any in one of the flats. And I think that's another reason for rejection. So thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. if these objections to the plans were so strong at the time, we would have rejected it in October. We didn't. We asked for it to be referred to, take some specific legal advice, which we've got, which clears up that issue. I think people on the planning committee, our officers in general, need to understand that there's a wide range of different housing needs, and yes, we need more 2, 3, 4 bedroom houses, but considering the population that live in Merton, there is still a definite need for small one bed flats, and this is basically changing one small dwelling into 2 small dwellings. I want to particularly touch on the bins issue. It's a non-issue. I live in a small block of 2 maisonettes, a ground floor and an upstairs floor maisonette. Outside in the front garden, we have 2 of each of the wheelie bins. We haven't yet come to an arrangement between us to get rid of 2, but every 2 weeks when the 2 wheelie bins are emptied, the people come and collect 4 1/3 full wheelie bins, and that's for 2 2-bedroom flats. 2 1-bedroom flats are never, ever, apart from possibly at Christmas when you've had loads of cardboard and packaging delivered, you're never, ever going to fill even 2 wheelie bins between them. It's just not going to happen. Those properties are going to be have 1, possibly 2 people in them. They're not going to produce that amount of rubbish. It's just, that's a complete red herring argument. Basically, we didn't have grounds, nobody had grounds to reject this in October, apart from delay it because of the legal advice. The legal advice has come back fine. You still don't have grounds to reject it. Let's just get on and pass it.
Move to vote on your recommendation, please. So, do you want to repeat what we're voting on?
Yes, in essence, this is already a very small property, and it's completely inappropriate to attempt to convert it into 2 yet smaller 1-bed flats. It will provide substandard living accommodation, and the lack of amenity space for the second flat too is a factor.
Six, which is a transmitter mast in Blenheim Close.
Chair, this application is brought to committee due to the number and nature of objections. The proposals are for a replacement mast and associated equipment. It's on a small parcel of land on the crook of a bend in Blenheim Close. The site backs onto a landscaped open space forming part of the Rains Park Tennis Club site, and there are modern dwellings further to the south, and I'm just moving the hand across the screen. Show those are the new dwellings that were allowed following an appeal about 10 years ago, and this is the area occupied by the tennis club. This is the open space. We've got a number of locally listed buildings over here, pairs of semis here, and some more conventional interwar dwellings here. The proposals would replace an existing 11.7 metre high telecoms pole with a 20 metre high pole. The site has long been used for the siting of a telecommunications pole. The council determined that the existing pole, in effect a more robust replacement of an earlier pole, did not require what's known as prior approval in 2016. This is one of the government's light touch planning submissions requiring the local planning authority simply to consider the siting and appearance of telecommunications equipment. The existing metal pole replaced an earlier pole of similar height, which had been allowed on appeal after planning officers had refused a proposal back in 2006. And there you can see the existing pole. You'll see details of the height and dimensions of the pole are set out in the officer's report. The proposals are part of an upgrade to deliver 5G telecommunications connectivity locally. You'll also be aware that various objections have been received, and they're set out in section 5 on page 29 of the agenda papers, and not least of which, again, are concerns regarding the visual impact of the pole. You'll see that the officer's report considers the support given nationally to facilitate the delivery of the 5G telecoms network. Officers go on to consider visual impact both more generally in the locality and on neighbouring occupiers. Officers fully acknowledge that the new mast will have a greater impact. But what I think is important to flag up in this instance is the government, in looking to assist in delivering 5G connectivity, acknowledges that telecoms masts will need to be higher. The 2015 version of the General Planning Development Order put a limit on the heights of masts, but there were other criteria that had to be applied in order for the mast to be permitted development. In 2016, the government went further and permitted masts, provided they met other criteria, to go not to 20 metres, but to 25 metres on what were called unprotected sites. So this is in effect an unprotected site. There are, however, other criteria, and recognising that a higher mast will probably need greater structural stability, there are also criteria which which have been retained in the General Permitted Development Order, which relates to the width of the mast, not in terms of an absolute dimension, but if it's increased by more than 1/3 at any given height, which this mast would do, then it no longer benefits from being permitted development. So I think it's important to just flag that up so that we're not just focused on the height of this particular proposal. The proposals require a judgment to be made, weighing up national guidance and policies on visual amenity and other material considerations such as the earlier appeal decision. In this instance, officers consider that planning permission could reasonably be granted.
Thank you. Terry Woolley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Planning Committee. I hope you had a chance to read through the document I sent through earlier, outlining some of my concerns in relation to the comments just made. I'll quickly summarise those points, primarily in relation to the visual intrusion. First and foremost, I acknowledge the need for the UK to embrace 5G and the benefits it will bring. I don't wish to stand in the way of progress, but nor do I think the lives of local Merton residents should play second fiddle to the convenience and cost benefits of the telecoms corporations. The site in question, as Mr Smith in his documents pointed out, was initially rejected for a phone mast by the Merton Planning Office due to, and I quote, The proposed mast, by reason of its size and siting, constitutes an intrusive feature in this predominantly residential setting, which would be harmful to the visual amenities of the Blenheim Close street scene and adjacent open space. Mr. Smith went on to correctly point out that this was overturned on appeal. However, he failed to highlight the following reason given by the inspector in overturning that original finding. The installation would take the form of an imitation wooden telephone pole. The slenderness and uncluttered profile of the mast, with the antennae accommodated inconspicuously, would ensure that the installation does not form a discordant feature detracting from the appearance of the vicinity. The above appeal decision was made in relation to an 11.7 metre tall mast disguised as a wooden telephone pole. Sadly, the proposed 20 metre tall metallic mast with 12 antennae apertures will be a very different beast. And further, the above decision was made prior to the residential development of Meadowview Estate to the south of the site, which added a further 37 properties overlooking the area. Therefore, in my view, the 2007 appeal never envisaged such a large discordant installation on the site, and therefore this proposal should not be viewed as a simple upgrade, but rather a new mast installation, in which case I would hope a more thorough review of alternatives might have been expected, rather than the half-hearted attempt in the current application. In the original 2006 application, a number of other sites were considered, with Prince George's playing fields and disguising the mast alongside the Rains Park Vale Football Club floodlights noted. Surely this would be a more sensible site for such a size mast. It would involve work and cost for the telecoms companies, not only in laying cable, but reconfiguring the local network. But is this inconvenience to larger corporates any worse than the daily visual intrusion for the local Merton residents? As the diagram I included in the document I submitted, the proposed mast leads to a near doubling in the height of the current installation, dwarfing any local tree or man-made structure. There is no disguising the mast in its proposed form, and it gives a sense of a NASA base station reaching out to ET rather than that of a family street. Such a structure on a residential street, in my humble opinion, is almost unprecedented in Merton. So I would ask the committee to at least request the applicant go back and perform a detailed review of alternate sites and then come back with their findings. Should Blenheim Close still be the only viable site at that point, then I could accept in the needed technological developments the mast must go somewhere. But if it is required in a residential street, I would ask the council to impose upon this application similar requirements to the original appeal, namely that the mast be inconspicuous and not detract from the appearance of the vicinity. As I showed in the document I submitted, there are a number of ways to disguise such a mast, and whilst on closer inspection it will be quickly identified, the casual observer may not be drawn to such an overbearing metallic intrusion.
I have to stop you there. Thank you. I was going to say Councillor Gilly Lewis-Lavender, but it's Gilly Lewis-Lavender.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Woolley has demonstrated very accurately why this is an inappropriate proposal. I hope councillors have had a chance to look at the photographs I have left them. The first one shows the current mast from my family room window, supposedly disguised as a telegraph pole. The second one shows a 20-metre 5G mast. The little dot at the bottom is my husband, who is 5'9" tall, and the horrific height of this proposed mast could quite clearly not be disguised in this setting. I hope you will all agree that this proposal is entirely inappropriate for a residential area, and if approved, would set a precedent for future masts to be erected. A similar application was refused in Edge Hill, Southwest 19, contrary to policies DM, D2, D4 and D6 of the Adopted Sites and Policies Plan of July 2014. However, what we must be most concerned about is, are we putting up a huge health risk to our children? I'm sure the applicant will tell us that these masts are safe, but in my view, we have not tested this theory with time. It has already been agreed that these masts will not be erected near schools or where there are a large number of children present. Let me tell you that in Blenheim Close, Blenheim Road and Meadowview Road, there are at least 30 children living nearby. Excuse me. Also, there is a tennis club within yards where, with as many as 50 children are coached on a daily basis. This telephone mast would be near 80 children, and we cannot take the risk. Additionally, as the mast is nearly double the size, it would follow that the emissions would reach a broader base. The surrounding houses are almost all family homes and have hundreds of children living in them. Also, we must not ignore the damage this mast could do to bats, birds, bees and insects. Please listen to us and put this mast in an open space and disguise it appropriately. Do not try to save money by not having to lay new cables. Please take people's health and safety seriously and refuse this application. Thank you.
Liam Palmer. Is he here?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name's Liam Palmer. I work for Beacon Communications and we act for EE Limited and H3G UK Limited, who are looking to upgrade the existing monopole located at Blenheim Close. The existing mast was originally granted permission at appeal in 2007. It was then upgraded in 2016 to allow for introduction of 4G services following the grant of prior approval. As part of EE and H3G's continued network improvement programme, they wish to upgrade the existing site to facilitate additional coverage and capacity requirements, incorporating new technologies including 5G. The National Planning Policy Framework prescribes a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Section 10 confirms that advanced, high-quality and reliable communications infrastructure is essential for economic growth and social well-being. It also confirms that use of existing masts should be encouraged in preference to new sites. The applicant carried out pre-application consultation with the LPA, ward councillors and the local MP on the 17th of June 2019. No response was received to the letters sent. Thereafter, the current application was submitted on the 12th of July. The proposal seeks to introduce 5G technologies to the area to support the local economy and enable more people to work from home. The application was accompanied by supporting documentation, including a statement by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, encouraging LPAs to be open to such development and minimising barriers to deployment. The proposal seeks to introduce the most up-to-date technologies and equipment available, and the proposed scheme has been specifically designed for the site in question. The development is the minimum height and girth capable of accommodating 2G, 3G, 4G and 5G technologies for 2 operators, allowing for the avoidance of interference whilst also at the same time satisfying ICNAP standards. An ICNAP certificate is included with the application confirming that the relevant international health standards are adhered to. I understand that a number of objections have been raised and I will aim to deal with them in turn. EE and H3G are currently seeking to upgrade their existing mobile network to introduce 5G to the area. As I have already identified, existing sites are deemed by central government via the MPPF to be the starting point when considering an upgrade to avoid the proliferation of telecommunications sites. The site occupies a triangular piece of land with other utilities and street lamp to the front of the existing telecommunications site. Accordingly, not all of the land within the triangle is capable of being developed. One of the objectors has identified at least 2 other sites that they deem to be suitable, being Park Vale Football Club and Prince George's Playing Field. The use of a tree mast as an alternative to a monopole has also been suggested. The floodlights at Park Vale Football Club are 18 metres in height. They are, however, on slim lattice structures which would be incapable of supporting the equipment required in this instance. A more substantial lattice mast would be required, substantially taller, which would then require a compound some 10 metres by 10 metres, and any such structure would not be able to accommodate floodlights. It would therefore need to be an additional structure, and there is insufficient space for such development, even if it were feasible operationally. The nearest floodlight to the subject site is some 280 metres from the existing monopole. However, this is an established network, and moving the location of a mast such a long distance would inevitably lead to network coverage gaps, resulting in need for additional telecommunications base stations to rectify the situation. It is therefore not feasible in this instance. Moving the mast to the northeast would also get too close to 2 existing sites and could potentially degrade voice and data services to an area in West Barnes. The same issues would apply to the suggested location of Prince George's Playing Fields. It is only really possible to move the mast a maximum of approximately 100 metres to avoid causing significant faults in the network, as networks are strategically organised such that coverage plots overlap in order to provide coverage. A tree mast has also been suggested as an alternative. Tree masts have been used around the country in certain circumstances. However, such a solution is not possible here for a number of reasons. Tree masts require large foundations than monopoles of the type proposed. I have already mentioned the services that lie to the front of the site. There's insufficient space on this corner site to allow for foundations. Should the committee find it helpful, I can provide a copy of the services map surrounding the site, which clearly demonstrates this situation. Furthermore, if a tree mast were capable of providing such a solution, it would need to be in the region of 25 metres in height, as a canopy would need to be provided above the antennas. I would also suggest that even if it were possible, a 25-metre pine tree would be far more invasive than a 20-metre slimline monopole with a grey finish in this location. In conclusion, the planning officer has accepted the principle of the development of the form proposed. The site does not lie within any restricted planning designations, and the report confirms that the proposed monopole would not be out of keeping in context of the surrounding structures close to the site. It also confirms that it would not materially detract from the visual amenity of the open space or the character and appearance of the nearby locally listed buildings, or unduly affect the street scene to warrant the refusal of the application. The report also confirms that the proposal would not result in materially harmful impact to the neighbouring amenities. I therefore respectfully request that the planning permission is granted.
Questions? Councillor Macon.
Can I ask one of the officers initially what the designation of the open space is that's behind the proposed mast?
It doesn't have any protected designation. It was part of the redevelopment of the site that was permitted on appeal some years ago. So it's unlike, for example, the land on which the Rains Park Vale football ground is located, which is metropolitan open land.
Does that mean that, in theory, in the future, people could put in application to build properties on it? To build residential on that site, or is it? I'm understanding from what you've said that the site isn't protected, therefore it can be built on.
Chair, obviously we're tasked with making a decision on the application before us this evening, but you know, I think it would be premature and perhaps set us off on an inappropriate tack this evening to speculate on what might or might not be there at some point in the future. Sorry.
Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the 2016 permitted development guidance that you mentioned at the outset, what height and width could be erected without approval?
Chair, in the case of the alteration or replacement of a mast, the mast, excluding any antenna, would, when altered or replaced, exceed the greater of the height of the existing mast or a height of 25 metres above ground level on unprotected land, or 20 metres above ground level on Article 2.3 land, so that's protected land, or land which is on a highway, or, together with any antenna support structures on the mast, exceed the width of the existing mast and any antenna support structures on it by more than 1/3 at any given height. And I understand it's this criteria that the proposals breach.
So just to come back on that, it breaches the width element as opposed to the height element.
That's my understanding, because the applicant has come in with a proposal dead on 20 metres. So even if we were to treat this as being land which is on a highway, it would still be, because it says would exceed, not would be, would exceed that. So you know they've done their homework on this.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. It's been suggested that these 5G masts of this type are not permitted near schools. Could one of the planning officers clarify whether that is in fact the case, please?
Chair, just preparing some notes for this particular case, and I've established Public Health England says years of studies of radio waves show the risk of damage to health is unlikely at exposure to levels below internationally agreed limits. The applicant has fulfilled the requirement to provide what's called an ICNIRP certificate, and I think if Public Health England are saying that, it would be inappropriate for the council to decide it was going to set its own thresholds.
Are there any other questions? Comments? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I know that on this kind of topic of telecommunications and 5G and all of this, there is a lot of fear-mongering going about the potential health risks of such equipment being built. And I think that as a committee, when we're presented with an application that includes, certificates and other sort of written confirmation from international and national health experts confirming that there is no health risk posed, I would hope that the committee would take that into account rather than the fear-mongering.
Are there any other comments? Okay, well, we have a recommendation. Did you want to speak? Sorry. Okay, we have a recommendation before us to grant planning permission. Can I see those in favour, please? And those against? And not voting? And the recommendation is approved. To agenda item 7, which is 252 to 254 Haydens Road.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site outlined in red here is on a corner plot location with Haydens Road on the right-hand side of your screen and Cowdray Road to the north. The site itself currently comprises a detached building which comprises 8 residential flats, all existing one-bedroom flats. This is the existing building here, so from the street, from Haydens Road, on the right-hand side here, that's the building. And from Cowdray Road, this is the side of the building here. Cowdray Road, you have terrace houses as you go up the road, and it's a cul-de-sac. And there's a view from the rear of the building here. Just some site pictures submitted with the application. The proposal itself is to extend the building, increase the ridge height, and also do a further extension out the back to create an additional 8 residential units. 6 of the existing flats in the front part of the existing building would be retained, so there would be a loss of 2 flats to make way for the 8 proposed new flats as part of this development. The proposal, so in terms of street scene, the proposal would increase the ridge height of the building by 450mm, along with the eaves. At the back, the rear wing, we call it extension, would be set down into the ground by a metre, lowering its height. The street scene to Cowdray Road would be this. So currently, the existing building does this down to this point here with the hip roof. So it would extend out and then have the separate section at the back. Access to the building would be one access point here and one access point here, and one at the front would remain to some of the existing flats. So turning to the proposed site plan itself, this building here at the front retained the 1-bedroom units with access from this side. The proposed bike and bin storage accessed from the front, as well as a new side gate off Cowdray Road. So looking at the floor plans, two one-bedrooms and one two-bed unit at ground floor. As I said earlier, so the ground floor at the back would partially be set below the existing ground level. Turning to all floor plans, first floor, second floor, and then top floor. So there would be a flat within the roof at the back, and again within the roof at the front of the site. That's the existing floor plans, so just to help provide some context. Turns to site photographs, so that's a view from Hayden's Road from the front. And the corner, so from Cowgie Road. And again, at the back here, so proposal would increase the ridge height, extend this out in the same form, and an extension coming out here. A view taken further back on Cowgie Road. On Cowgie Road again. And then from within the site itself. So the case officer did visit the resident at number 2 Cowgie Road to the west as you're looking on plan. This is a view and a photograph taken from that neighbouring property's first floor side window, which serves a stairway and landing. Chair, for turn members' attention to the modification sheet, you'll note there the drawing numbers and changes in consultation, additional letter of objection. We have transport planning comments and some detailed comments from our flood risk officer on the scheme. So officers recommend those additional conditions be added. Overall, Chair, officers recommend permission be granted, subject to conditions in Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham Simmons, please. Okay.
Sorry? We're there now. Good. Okay. Thank you for those comments. And as I put in my letter, back when we received the initial information, the two issues really for us are the daylight and sunlight report, where I commented that it was prepared in August, 21st of August. Clearly, sunlight levels in August are very different than today, say. So it was also inaccurate and remains inaccurate and hasn't been addressed in terms of accuracy. It's also, the inaccuracy is that it states that the only two windows for our property facing the development are the stairwell window, which is accurate, and a WC at the back. In fact, at the back of our property is our kitchen, utility, and WC is actually behind that. You know, it repeatedly states that there won't be any significant reduction in light to us. It does that by actually saying that our windows are excluded from consideration because they are not habitable rooms. I did, as you went through the slides and pictures there, I did notice that when it came to looking at the vacant land between our property and the development, that seemed to go past quite quickly. Also commenting that on the amended plans, where all that's happened is that the type of windows facing us have been amended to be such that we can't see each other. But on our property, both from the side view and from the back, our windows aren't shown, which doesn't give an accurate perspective. We've been here in this property 25 years. There's a general sense of encroachment. There's been major development to the south, east, and major development to the west and the south of us, and extensions all the way down our garden. So there is already a feeling of encroachment. Thank you.
Peter Case, please.
Okay. Well, thank you first for the opportunity to speak, and also to thank the officers for their support during this application, from the pre-application through to the finalisation of these drawings. Just like to point out, the proposals represent the opportunity to redevelop the site in an imaginative and sustainable way, and to provide an increase in new homes, including 3-bedroom family units. In regard to the objection, the daylight sunlight report is based on BRE recommendations for the impact that a new development would have on existing windows and residential units. The report has concluded that the new development would have no adverse impact upon the neighbours, with due regard to the outlines of the recommendations of the BRE guidance. I would really just like to state that we are very happy with the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise should committee members have any. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on page 43, 7.3, in the standard accommodation, the 3-bedroom, 6-person flat, number 8, the proposed floor space is less than the London plan. Could you comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see why there has been a little bit of confusion on this. The applicant actually submitted 2 separate documents with 2 different tables. One, the one you see before you in our report, but there is another submission in their report, which, well, the one in our report is a 3-bedroom, 6-person unit, whereas the report that's been submitted by the applicant, alongside a similar table to this, actually describes it as a 3-bed, 4-person unit. Now, it's a little bit difficult to get in and have we got a more detailed one of that particular flat. Just to let you know, for a 3-bed, 4-person flat, the floor area would be 74 square metres, and therefore it would comply. If it was a 5-person, it would be 86 square metres and wouldn't comply, so it's getting closer. If we zoom in, which I think I can do, let me just do that in a second. We can get there. I think while zooming in, I can see the argument to see why it would be a... Oh, maybe we can't actually. We want to go like that, don't we? The trouble is when I zoom in, it goes right to the beginning again. Let me just Control L, and then I might just be able to right-click now. Go to the picture. Go if you can find that again. Yeah, sorry. If you look at the layout, which is very difficult here, and I haven't got a scale rule, and it's not to scale the plan, I can see an argument. You see the double bed there, which would be 2 people, and then you see the other 2 units are actually have single beds. And if you look at the units themselves, we're in the loft, so therefore you've got restricted height access. So I could certainly see one of the units, one of those actual bedrooms being a 1-bedroom unit. Though the other one with a 1 bed, I'm afraid I can't tell you now whether it's a 1 bed or a 2 bed, or whether it could be a 2 bed if you put a double bed in there. And we haven't got those measurements in front of us. What I would say is I could certainly agree that it would be marginally under in terms of a 5-bed unit, and I think I could quite happily accept that here now. But I can't categorically say it could be a 4-bedroom unit, so therefore it might be slightly over. So it's within your discretion whether you wish to make a decision on that basis. The alternative, of course, is to, depending if there's any other issues raised with the application, it could be deferred to find out further information, or we could refer it back to the Chair and Vice Chair for decision. If there are no other issues on the application this evening, we could then go and make that, because it is quite a minor issue in terms of the numbers, 6 or 7 square metres, we could then find out exactly and come back to the Chair and Vice Chair afterwards just to confirm that particular point before issuing any decision if there are no other objections to the application. That's just a suggestion.
Please. Yes, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like some clarification about the PTEL rating at 2, which I understand is low. And I think there's a suggestion that this should be a permit-free development. I'm just wondering if that's entirely consistent with a PTEL 2 rating.
Chair, so yes, PTEL 2 rating. However, the site itself in the applicant's transport assessment, there's the bus route, obviously on Hayden's Road. Nearest bus stop, I think it says 150 metres away. Further, you do have Hayden's Road train station, which is you can just see the line in the corner there. So it is just up here. Again, as the crow flies, it's about 150 metres up to that station. So whilst the PTEL rating technically is low, in this case, given we think it's quite a highly sustainable location, physically accessible to public transport, and being within a controlled parking zone, we're happy that the permit-free option can work in this case.
So are you effectively saying that the PTEL rating should be higher?
Yeah, so the PTEL rating can't change, but we've had a look at the site circumstances and where it lies.
Any other questions? Comments? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed that the planning history started since 1965. Let me put my glasses on properly. 1965. And I'm just wondering why it has been changing so much without anything has been done until now.
Are there any other questions, please? Comments? Is that a question?
Perhaps I should have understood this better, but the Hayden's Road frontage looks pretty sad at present. Is it going to be improved through this? And in particular, the windows are meanly proportioned. Will they be changed? I'm fine with the side, the Calder Road, the extension there, but
So, Chair, the proposal does include the refurbishment of the whole building. So, the roof does have to come off to extend upwards, and it would include a full refurbishment of the building, including replacing windows in the front. The proposal also includes a formal landscaping at the front here, where we will be looking for some additional tree planting as well to assist. Some trees have been removed on the site, but they weren't protected. But we consider there's quite a large. If you look at the layout, you see it's a very large frontage, which obviously isn't used for parking, and so we're using that. Essentially, the applicant's taking advantage of that for space for cycle storage and bins. But also, all this is soft landscaping here. So in terms of the frontage, we think there will be quite a number of improvements.
Any other comments? No. So on the page 43 in section 8, if it's a 3-bedroom, 6-person, it is below the standard. If it's a 3-bedroom, 4-person, it's above. So I'm a little bit confused about if we approve it, and then get clarification on that. Can we not get clarification now?
It's difficult because I can't measure off the plan either in the file or on the screen here.
Okay.
The applicant has submitted saying it's a 4-person, but it's a judgment call. If I could zoom in, it would be a little bit easier to explain. Because you can see, in fact, we've got the plan here, you can see that there is, a double bedroom and 2 single beds in the other 2 bedrooms. So what they have submitted looks like a 4-person flat.
Right.
It's just I can't categorically say that the units couldn't be potentially a double bedroom. I could certainly say one of them couldn't be. The one thing I would say, I think that I'd give the benefit of the doubt, because it is in the roof space, you can see the dotted line where the ceiling is restricted in size. So I think it's entirely up to you, but I'd probably give the benefit of the doubt to say that it could be a 4-person unit rather than a 6-bedroom because of that restricted height in the loft space.
And those comments will be made in the report?
Well, they're not in the report before you.
No, in the minutes, sorry, I mean in the minutes.
In the minutes, but this evening your decision, if you were to make a decision, would be on the basis of the plan that's been submitted. In other words, it would be for a 4-bedroom unit that complies with the standard. That's what's before you at this moment in time. It's unfortunate the report has copied a table that was also submitted by the applicant. In other words, there were 2 tables submitted,
okay,
and this particular one's been picked up for the report.
Are you happy with that? Yep. Okay, let's move to the recommendation then. Can I see those in favour? Please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. The recommendation's approved then. And there were additional conditions that you mentioned? Yeah. Which includes those additional conditions. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is 74 Hazelwood Avenue, Morden.
Chair, this application is brought before committee due to the number and nature of objections that have been received. The proposal is for the erection of a new 2-storey 4-bedroom dwelling, as described at paragraph 3.3, and not, as on the front sheet of the report or at paragraph 3.1, a 3-bedroom dwelling. This does not detract from the assessment against adopted policies and standards, as this is based on a 4-bedroom dwelling. The drawings show a house of a design that seeks to reflect closely, if I can just take you to the drawings, that seeks to reflect closely that of the existing terrace, and with a small dormer on the rear roof slope and a single-storey rear extension similar to that recently erected under permitted development at 74. Various objections pertaining to impact on neighbour amenity, including loss of light, overshadowing, parking, construction nuisance, and loss of a visual gap within the street, are set out at section 5 of the report. The provision of an additional family house is welcomed and fulfills planning objectives of increasing density and making more effective use of sites. Internal and external space standards are met, and separation distances from neighbouring houses are such that loss of privacy would not arise. The current gap in the street scene is somewhat uncharacteristic, and a gap would still be kept. If I just take to the photographs again. A gap would still be kept between the new dwelling and the pair of flats to the north. The street is characterised by extensive dropped curbs and parking spaces, making on-street parking along much of the street without blocking a neighbour's drive not possible. However, there is adequate space to park to the front of the proposed dwelling, along with an existing dropped curb that served the garage. The proposals would not contribute to on-street parking pressure and would not require the removal of the existing tree, which is one of the sources of objection. Other matters, such as impact from construction noise, can to a degree be mitigated by suitable construction hours condition, and planning permission is recommended subject to conditions.
We have no speakers for this item. Can I have questions, please? Councillor Southgate.
Just some clarification on the parking provision. At present, the owners of the existing house number 74 are presumably using the off-road parking that's there. That will go to the new house. And it's not proposed that this be permit-free or anything, is it? So is there adequate capacity within M2 for issue of a permit?
Chair, I visited the site and you may see from the planning history that there was a certificate of lawfulness determined in autumn last year for extensions, alterations to the existing dwelling. The applicant has perhaps got a little bit ahead of themselves and has already removed the front garden area, which they're entitled to do, and they have created a new, you can see in the photograph there, they've created a new hard standing in front of their property. Sorry, this is the site where the works to create the roof extension have been carried out, and similar to the house next door, they have created a hard standing. So sorry, this hard standing has been replicated on the existing house. This gap here, as you can see at the bottom of the image, has the drop curb, and that would lead on to the new hard standing. So, as I said in my presentation, the character of the street is most of the houses have hard surfaced front gardens and drop curbs, and the two properties would have, I suppose, between them probably 4 parking spaces.
Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Southgate.
By comparison with that earlier photograph of the front garden, I can only say, how sad.
That was it. No other comments. Can we move to the recommendations then, please? Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Recommendations approved. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is 34 Lingfield Road.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site outlined here in red is at 34 Lingfield Road, just south of High Street, Wimbledon Village. The current site comprises a mansion block of 4 flats. The application itself relates to the single-storey garage building, which you can just see here to the left-hand side of the building as you're looking from an aerial view. So the application itself is for the erection of a 3-bed dwelling house following demolition of the existing single-storey garage building. The dwelling will be occupied over 3 floors, basement, ground and first floor. The proposal also includes extending there's an existing basement underneath the footprint of the garage at the moment. The proposal also includes extending the basement further out to create more floor space. Parking would be proposed 2 spaces within the front, making use of the existing drop curb that is there for the access way. The rear garden would be split with a fence. Looking at the floor plans, this is the basement plan on the left, ground floor and first floor. So the design itself, single ridge dwelling with flat roof rear, you could call them single-storey additions going at the back. So the proposal here as viewed from the front, from the road, so you can just see dotted outline the existing garage structure here, and then the proposed house you can see here. So it would be facing brick with contemporary windows in terms of its design. Looking at the rear, again facing brick, large windows, And there's a single-storey section here with a green cedar roof being proposed. Looking at the side view, so some solar panels proposed near the rear of the property with roof lights, and then the single-storey extension coming out here. And the other side, likewise. Looking at existing tree plans, the proposal does include the removal of several trees on the site, which are located here. All of them to be deemed to be Category C trees. You'll note from our tree officer's comments that there's no objection to the removal of the trees. This is the tree protection plan. So there's a larger tree at the back here and further back here, and a large oak at the front. They would be retained as part of the proposal. Also recommending landscaping condition where we would include additional tree planting as well to be included within that. Some pictures submitted with the application itself. So looking at the front, that's the existing building there. And this is the site here. So essentially the site would be divided from the building here. There is a low-rise planter, brick planter at the front to help with some landscaping in front of the building. You also note that there was an application submitted earlier last year, which was withdrawn. The scheme has been reduced in height, essentially since that. To the west is number 35. We have some side windows serving. There's 4 flats within this building: basement, ground, first, and top floor. You'll note in the modification sheet that we had some submission, 2 photographs from a maybe resident with their comments on the trees. These are these 2 pictures just to assist in the presentation here. You'll note we did get a view from our tree officer on the comments on the trees, which we've added in there. Further, we have now received comments from our flood risk officer looking at the proposal, his recommended conditions, and also transport planning have actually looked at the proposal in terms of parking and access as well. Further, Chair, there's additional condition which should have been on the agenda, which is in relation obviously to climate change. So overall, Chair, officers recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Have Mark Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the owner of 7 Lingfield Road, where I live with my family. So thank you to the committee for the opportunity to express the basis for my strong objection to the planning application. I'd like to make the following 5 points, if I may. Firstly, the new build proposed has 2 oversized windows to the front of the elevation, which will directly overlook number 7, causing considerable loss of privacy. If the defence is the use of blinds, how can that really be controlled? Secondly, the new build proposes twice the height of the garage, where minimal loss of light is predicted. This cannot be the case and will inevitably result in a material loss of light to the basement windows to number 7. Third point, the cars to be parked on the new build will likely have to reverse out onto the road or reverse in, which will inevitably cause a safety risk to pedestrians and oncoming traffic on Lingfield Road. Fourth, the new build proposed is described as contemporary design, which seems to equate to a tall, narrow building and large windows at the front. This is at odds with the rest of the road, where there are many listed buildings. The new build proposed will detract from the overall impression of an attractive road in a conservation area. As the architect states, the key feature of the surrounding character is large back gardens with mature trees. This additional dwelling will neither retain nor complement this. Which brings me to my 5th point. There are many trees in the new build back garden, 16 trees at least, 3 of which are category B, but 13 are category C. As already mentioned, the tree officer report says, in general, Cat C trees should not be considered a material restraint to development. So that means there is a potential for about 13 Cat C trees to be removed, which does seem very much at odds with the environmental sentiment. And in fact, if my daughter was here presenting, she would have this as her number one point. I am pleased to note that Merton's Climate Energy Working Group is also concerned about private landowners felling trees in conservation areas and new developments removing mature trees, as noted at their meeting on 6th of November 2019. Finally, I also note, as part of the planning permission for number 1A Linkfield Road, for which, incidentally, they were made to keep the facade of their rebuild due to it being in a conservation area, they also had to keep the silver birch in their garden because, as the planning said, you can see it from the road and you can see most of the trees, or many of the trees, from number 34 from the road. Thank you for your consideration of these points.
Thank you, Chair. We hope you've had a chance to read some of the information that we sent through yesterday, which highlighted some inaccuracies in the Planning Office report, which I'm encouraged by because the Planning Officer insists on saying that there's 4 apartments in number 34, where in actual fact there's 5. 4 residential and 1 commercial suite. Anyway, we are owner-occupiers of number 8 Lingfield Road, so we're cheek by jowl with my neighbour here. The application contends that weight is to be given to outstanding or innovative designs, raising the standard of design more generally in an area. However, this proposal simply does not fit in with the overall form and layout of its surroundings. After all, how many other facades in our road have only 2 oversized asymmetric windows comprising approximately 30% of the front elevation? The answer, unsurprisingly, is none. Lingfield Road's not wide and is one way only where we live. The separation between our house and the new build is only about 23 metres, and the glazing examples illustrated by the architect are somewhat misleading, being set well back from the road, have no direct view of neighbouring properties, are surrounded by trees, or in rural locations. None of the above apply to Lingfield Road, unfortunately. The new build proposed is tall and narrow, much of the accommodation being in the basement, the extension of which will undoubtedly have an impact on the trees we've just been talking about. The SUDS report also suggests that there's going to be a 9 cubic metre rainwater harvesting tank, which has got to go somewhere, we're not sure where. The back garden's going to be presumably the hot spot, and so that's going to make more impact on the trees that are there. And we feel that there's going to be some destruction that's going to be inevitable in the context of facilitating development. The loss of the garage on which these plans are based reduces the off-street parking by 2 spaces and also prevents flat 2 right of way, which is in their lease, which expires in 2079. The current arrangement at number 34 provides an in and out driveway, which your map showed, and with 2 cars in front of the new build, which blocks the exit point from the 1 car that's in front of flat 2. So as such, it will cease to function. Within Merton Development Control Planning Document Item 10, vehicle parking, 5 spaces were claimed as currently existing. Clearly this is incorrect, 2 spaces having disappeared with the garage, thus a 40% reduction is achieved. So, in summation, drawn from this proposal, where the infill building would be an incongruous addition to our street scene, open for everybody to see inside and out when passing, has reduced the number of off-street parking spaces, has reduced the number and scale of trees at the location, and blocked vehicular access for an existing leaseholder. Needless to say, we look forward to hearing that this application has been refused as an unnecessary addition to a conservation area. Thank you.
Lost my sheet of paper. Is Alan Cullen here? No? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. A few points obviously raised there. So, in relation to the front and the oversized windows, they have been reduced since the submission of the original application. It is subject to a judgment, planning judgment on the scheme. So, whilst it's modern looking with the windows, it does reflect some features in the road, such as the use of facing brick and obviously the gable end. So, it is somewhat of a sort of a modern coach house, you could say, compared to the mansion block. It has been reduced in height substantially since the previous submission. In terms of trees, the small groups of trees are to be removed at the back to facilitate the proposal. Our tree officer has looked at these and are not considered to be of wider visual merit. We have reinstated a landscaping condition to capture additional tree planting within that landscaping condition, which can be achieved towards the rear of the new garden. In terms of impact on neighbours, the applicants have submitted a daylight sunlight assessment, which has concluded that whilst there would be some impact on 2 windows in number 35, it's not considered to breach BRE guidelines. As the new build is opposite, the house is opposite Lingfield Road, that distance in regards to overlooking that was mentioned, that's an acceptable planning distance across the street in terms of overlooking. So, Chair, I hope that's assisted with tonight's debate.
Questions? Councillor Ward.
Yes, just on that very last point about the permitted distance between dwellings for it to be considered overlooking. You said it's within the permitted, and I think resident of number 8 said it was 23 metres between the front of the proposed new dwelling and the front of that property. What is the guideline on how many metres between houses that you would start to consider that it might be too close and start overlooking?
So, Chair, we don't have actually adopted guidelines on this at the moment, but the Merton Council used to. But generally speaking, 20 metres would be acceptable, but when it's cross-road relationship, it can be closer. So, I mean, you'll see, this is a 3-storey mansion block here. Obviously, it's an existing relationship, but that would not be harmful, particularly bearing in mind the size of the dwelling being proposed.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you. Can I just clarify the point about the tree in front of the garage? Can you go back a slide, I think? Oh, no, sorry, I meant the kind of visual of the front. That's it, go back. So that, as I'm looking at it, to my right, your left, there seems to be a kind of outline of a tree there. Is that a real tree, and are those its real proportions? Is that kind of an artistic impression?
That is an artistic impression, but it is based on the tree survey, that is an oak tree here.
Can I say? And it's been suggested that there's an impact on the adjacent access rights to the adjacent property. Is that, how much weight should we give to that in our considerations?
So in objection submissions, we've seen that there is, under the lease for flat 2, a right of access to over this area here and out through the other exit. What we have looked at is, well, they have a right of parking here. Can they reasonably turn around and get out this way? So whilst that is a conflict, you could say, with someone's internal lease arrangements, but not for us to warrant an objection in planning terms.
Any more questions? Comments? No comments? Can we move to the recommendation then, please? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Not voting. Recommendations carried. Now move on to agenda item 10. Sorry, brain not engaged. Oh. Which is the TPO. I'm trying to find my report on here. The tree preservation order at Land Leeward Gardens, please.
Yes, Chair, the preservation order, it seeks confirmation of the preservation order that made by our tree officers. The report is there in detail before you. Nothing further to say, really. And there's a picture on the screen just to show the tree.
There was a comment made about a legal issue. Could you comment on that for us, please? That was raised by Councillor Holden.
Yes, I was expecting that to be raised. I was going to respond to it afterwards, but I'm happy to talk about that now. There is a debate about the ownership of the land. I understand it's owned by a company now. The Green Spaces, I think, were looking after it for a period of time. It seems to be privately owned. We're not quite sure at this moment in time. What I would say is, as you're aware, in terms of planning considerations, ownership is not an issue in terms of consideration for the particular preservation order that's being proposed.
So we have Tony Anderson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I've got you.
Right, thank you. Yes. Well, on the back of that comment, actually, it is quite surprising to us that this item is still before you on the agenda tonight, rather than having been deferred because of this legal issue. There are legal and procedural issues surrounding this whole case, which have yet to be resolved, and which also, incidentally, involve other departments of the council, such as highways and of course your legal advisors. If I might just briefly explain, I am chair of the Residents Association in Harrow Court, which is a little bit further up the hill from Leeward Gardens there, and it's only recently that we were informed that this parcel of land, which is the one where the tree is standing on there, probably falls within our ownership, which, if is true, would be a rather sorry, if not bizarre, legacy of the conveyancing transactions that followed the breakup of the Belvedere estate several decades ago. We're not convinced that these transactions have been accurately recorded, and we're pursuing that with our legal advisors. That's the legal point number one. The second legal point is that this question mark over ownership also extends to a question mark over responsibility for the maintenance of that property. Highways, the council have highways adoption, so to speak. The council have seemed to have accepted, certainly for at least the last nearly 50 years, that they were responsible, or that you're responsible for the maintenance. They even laid that footpath on the private land there, and this is an issue that also needs to be teased out and resolved, hopefully amicably, without further recourse to legal proceedings. So I think it really isn't correct for the officer's report to dismiss these issues and dismiss the role of other council departments, including, as I say, its legal department, as irrelevant, particularly when the report states that a preservation order would remove any doubt as to the responsibility for the land. It would not. But what it would do is to risk prejudicing the outcome of these legal proceedings over this land, its ownership and its adoption. So I'd strongly suggest tonight, strongly request that the decision on the preservation order be deferred, if not actually rejected in its entirety, at least until these legal issues have been clarified and sorted out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Holden.
Yep, thank you. I wholly agree with Tony from Howding Court, and I just really want to reiterate some of those points just so you're definitely clear on them. So I'm here to oppose this TPO application. Normally, you wouldn't expect me to be opposing tree preservation, but on this occasion, I am. So basically, you need to take this quite seriously. It's not a usual situation. It's rather unusual. So either please refuse or defer, as has already been requested, until such time as the legal aspects of the case have been resolved between the council and the apparent owners of the tree. The application is premature and really shouldn't have been brought before this committee for determination. It should have been left until later on. It is deeply unfair and unjust to place a TPO burden on an unsuspecting group of owners. These owners do not benefit from the tree, they do not live near the tree, and when you look at the map on page 77, you can clearly see that. They did not even know they owned the tree until apparently only last year. So, and also, most crucially, there is no risk to the tree, making putting a TPO on wholly unnecessary. If the council wants a TPO, they should adopt the maintenance and the upkeep of this tree, as they have previously done for nearly 50 years. The report even mentions that highways trees do not normally even have TPOs. This tree could be considered a highways tree. It's basically on the side of a highway, a road in a street that doesn't even adjoin Haverdean Court. So basically the council has been unfair here. They've cut the grass and fixed the pavement. So really they should be adopting the maintenance and responsibility here. And this TPO should not be granted. Basically what I'm asking for is do the right thing. Please refuse or defer this application tonight. Thank you.
Conflicting advice there. Do you want to reaffirm your position then?
Yes, I mean, it is unfortunate there seems to be some debate about responsibility of the site. I would probably argue that's even more reason to serve a TPO while it's uncertain what's happening with the land. In terms of future responsibilities, that will be sorted out separate to this application. If you were to defer the application or even reject it, then the tree is potentially at risk. I'm not suggesting for a second the new owners would cut it down, but it is potentially at risk. For instance, if the land was legally defined to be theirs and then it's sold on, another developer may well wish to do that. So for that reason, and obviously it would therefore, if deferred as well, we'd probably run out of time on the application for confirmation. I think you get a certain amount of weeks. I'm not quite sure exactly where we are on that, but it's always quite tight normally when the report comes to committee. So again, that would put the tree at risk as well. Thank you.
That in mind then. Are there any questions? Councillor Crowe.
Thank you. Can I ask the category of this tree and how that determines the TPO status or not?
You don't normally get categories as such for this kind of a tree preservation order. It's an assessment by the arboriculture officer about the quality of the tree and whether it's worthy of a TPO. It's not a development site as such, so you don't categorise the tree in that particular fashion.
Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. If the TPO is confirmed, that is still subject possibly to an appeal, yes?
You can make an application to remove the tree and appeal against that if necessary as well, so that option is always there, yes.
I think my other, I mean, it's difficult to be sure of this, but if we do confirm tonight, is in your view, is that open to a legal challenge or our decision or judicial review?
I haven't got specific legal advice on that, but my feeling is that wouldn't be the case. I mean, obviously, it's clearly possible if someone can take legal JR on absolutely anything, but in this particular case, planning legislation is quite clear. In terms of all the applications you deal with at this committee, ownership is never usually an issue. You can make applications on any property by anybody.
Thank you, Chair. Could the officers just confirm if the tree protection order is confirmed, does that simply prevent the owners from taking any action that would damage the tree, or does it burden them with further responsibilities in terms of, maintaining the tree?
I think that's the issue of concern. You have to separate those two issues. Just because the TPO is on the tree, it's therefore relevant for whoever owns the land or whoever owns the tree. And by the sound of it, I don't know categorically, that doesn't appear to have been sorted out yet. So that's a separate matter.
I'm not sure that I understood if the answer to that question. If there's an order, do you just have to not do anything to the tree, or do you positively have to maintain it?
Maintenance is relevant to who owns the site. Now, at this moment in time, I understand that it's a company that now owns the site. Apparently, the Land Registry, that's who says owns the site, even though it's been maintained by the council. So theoretically, whoever owns the site would be maintaining it, no matter if there's a TPO there or not. So it's not really relevant to the designation of the tree under the Tree Preservation Order Act.
I'm just missing something, I think. It seems a simple question. Regardless of who owns the land, if there's a TPO, do you have a positive duty to maintain the tree, or do you just have to not do anything to it?
If it requires maintenance, then you would have to apply for a tree preservation application to lop the tree or adjust it in any fashion. If you were to want to remove it for any reason, you'd then have to apply, and obviously the owner would have to pay to do all that. If it got in such a state that it became dead, dying or dangerous, then they could apply to remove it. They'd have to pay for the works to remove the tree, assuming they own the land. If the legal challenge or whatever says that it's the council that owns the land, then they'd have to pay for it. So it's whoever owns the land would have to pay for the works.
Are we clear? Okay. Right, so we've had questions. Are there any comments? Then we move to the vote. Are we going to give this tree preservation order the green light? Those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So those against? Not voting. Right, then the recommendation is agreed to introduce a TPO. Thank you. So now we move on to planning appeals. This is a report to note. A quick note. So we've had 1, 2, 3 dismissed and 2 allowed. We now move on to the enforcement report, again to note. And if you do have any issues that you wish to bring to officers' attention about enforcement in your area, please deal with that directly with officers. But is there anything in this report you want to comment on? Yeah, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you. It seems that the cases have reduced from just over 1,000 to just over 600, which sounds very good news. So I think congratulations to enforcement officers. But can one just have a comment on the 291 others that have been closed, please?
Yeah, I was going to mention this actually in terms of the numbers. Remember, we didn't have a committee in December, but in any event, we've got extra resources for the enforcement team at the moment. We've been closing cases significantly more than opening cases, so those figures are particularly correct. In terms of the others, I mean, that's in terms of the 3, 4, 5 breakdown, in terms of breaches ceased, and the others is normally not expedient to take action. It wraps up quite a number of aspects in terms of why we close the case down. But there has been significant improvements. We're actually, I was looking at the figures today, it's actually improved again. We're down to about 540 now. We have been closing a significant number down. We've got extra people in the team doing that. It's a temporary fix for now until the end of March. The idea being to get it right down so we only have very few cases over a year old, but it's been very successful so far.